Hello and welcome to India Business Hour. I'm Shireen Pan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. A late recovery on the Lal Street. The Nifty ends above 20,000 for the first time ever. Mid-caps and small caps recoup some losses after yesterday's sharp fall. Crude prices hit 10-month highs. Floods in Libya, maintenance work in Kazakhstan impact output, stoking fears of a supply disruption. Just last week, Saudi Arabia and Russia had announced that they would voluntarily extend their production cuts to the end of the year.
Technical competence, off the charts. I mean, we do most of our technical development globally is done out of our Indian technology centers. Entrepreneurial, right to the core.
Standard Chartered's global CEO Bill Winters says India is welcoming to long-term foreign players and international investors are keen on tapping into the consumer, infrastructure and tech market. Reveals Standard Chartered has taken big losses in China and the stimulus is not lifting the Chinese market yet. Also adds China's financial system remains strong. Global debt burden retreats for the second year in a row as per the IMF, but the debt remains above the pre-pandemic level. The IMF also says China played a central role in increasing global debt in the recent decades. Over 6,000 people dead, thousands missing after devastating floods in Libya. The port city of Derna has been reduced to rubble. The International Rescue Committee calls for urgent global aid. Top global tech CEOs including Elon Musk, Sundar Pichai, Mark Zuckerberg and others meet US lawmakers, take part in a closed-door brainstorming session to regulate artificial intelligence. Celebrations at the BJP headquarters. The party felicitates Prime Minister Modi on the success of the G20 summit and discusses the way forward for the upcoming state elections. The Coordination Committee of the Opposition's India Alliance meets at NCP founder Sharad Pawar's residence in Delhi to discuss seat sharing and campaign strategy, agrees to take up the issue of caste census. The bloc's first joint public meeting will be held in Bhopal. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un meets Vladimir Putin in Russia, vows to give Moscow full and unconditional support towards what he calls Russia's sacred fight. Apple unveils the Series 9 watch, calling it the first carbon-neutral product from its stable. Also launches the iPhone 15 lineup with a USB-C port and an improved camera system. Apple shares traded in the red soon after the announcement. All of that and more coming up for you on this edition of India Business Hour. But first up, as always, let's go straight to the market wall. The markets did recover today from their intraday lows, ending higher. The Nifty ending above 20,000 for the first time ever, so history has been made. And the recovery was led by financials. Mid-cap and small caps also did recover some lost ground after yesterday's sharp sell-off. So that's the story. The Sensex up 245 points. The Nifty closing above 20,000. The Nifty mid-cap 100 up, but just about, but off its intraday lows, recouping some of the losses, and similar story playing out for the small cap index. So what sparked the roller coaster move that we've seen in mid caps and small caps over the last few days? Well, there was speculation and unconfirmed reports on liquidation by a large hedge fund. The fund manager in question has denied the allegations and threatened to in fact take legal action. Data from exchanges also shows that foreign institutional investors sold stocks worth over 1,000 crore rupees yesterday, while domestic investors bought shares worth over 250 crore rupees. This also puts rest the speculation about a large-scale liquidation in mid-caps and small caps. It's not being borne out there by the FII data. Now, data that is moving markets worldwide. US inflation accelerated for the second straight month in August to 0.6% sequentially versus estimates of 0.5%. This was largely driven by the rise in fuel prices. On a year-on-year basis, inflation rose 3.7% compared to 3.2% in July. However, core inflation fell to 4.3% in August from 4.7% in July. So that's the inflation trajectory in the US. This is something that the Fed will ponder over. Crude oil prices hovering around a 10-month high after supply fears spooked the markets. Prices up 2% overnight, largely driven by temporary supply disruption caused by Libya, which has been hit by deadly storms triggering devastating floods. Now, just last week, Saudi Arabia and Russia had announced that they would extend the voluntary production cuts that they had announced to the end of the year. So what we are seeing is fuel prices rising above $90 a barrel on the back of these temporary setbacks. Global debt continues to decline for the second consecutive year, as per the latest update from the IMF's database. Now, global debt has fallen 10 percentage points of GDP to 238% in 2022, and this fall is mainly due to the rebound that we're seeing in economic activity post the pandemic. But the IMF has raised a red flag, pointing to a rising trend in the debt burden. Ritu joins us now to take us through the details of what the IMF is saying. Ritu, the debt story, what's the IMF's prognosis?
The global debt burden retreated for a second year in a row, even though it remains above its already high pre-pandemic level. That's according to IMF's latest global debt database. The total global debt stood at 238% of global GDP in 2022, and that's 9 percentage points higher than in 2019. In US dollar terms, debt amounted to $235 trillion, or about $200 billion more than its level in 2021. Debt sustainability, now that is a big question mark, and that's why IMF has called for policymakers to be unwavering over the next few years in their commitment to preserving debt sustainability. Now, despite the economic growth rebound from 2020, fiscal deficits have kept public debt levels elevated because many governments spent more to boost growth and respond to the food and energy price spikes. Now, as a result, public debt has declined by just 8 percentage points of GDP in the last 2 years, offsetting only about half of the pandemic-related increase, and private debt, which includes household and non-financial corporate debt, declined at a faster rate, dropping 12 percentage points of GDP. But even then, the decline was not enough to erase the pandemic surge that we saw. Now, IMF data shows that global public debt has tripled since the mid-70s to cross $91 trillion by end of 2022, and private debt also tripled to close to $144 trillion, but over a longer time span between 1960 and 2022. China has played a central role in increasing global debt in the recent decades as their borrowing outpaced economic growth. China's debt as a share of GDP has risen to about the same level as the United States, although in absolute terms, US's debt of about $70 trillion is much higher than China's $47.5 trillion. Now, IMF has warned that more than half of low-income developing countries are in or at high risk of debt distress, and about 1/5 of emerging markets have sovereign bonds trading at distressed levels. And so the IMF has urged governments to take urgent steps to help reduce debt vulnerabilities and reverse long-term debt trends, something it highlighted during the recent G20 conversations here as well.
Ritu, many thanks for joining us. That is the IMF on global debt. Now, global tech major Oracle's share suffering its deepest single-day drop in over 2 decades last night, and this after the cloud service provider reported slowing cloud sales and weak revenue guidance for the quarter. The company's revenue growth of 30% also declined sequentially. And staying with global earnings, I.N.D.I.A reported a record global revenue for the financial year ending June 2023 at just under $50 billion. The company has also ramped up its investment into its audit, innovation and technology verticals to $3.6 billion. Of this, $1.4 billion has been pumped into the launch of I.N.D.I.A's artificial intelligence platform. And back home, I.N.D.I.A will add more leased planes to its fleet ahead of the impending engine recall by Pratt & Whitney. DGCA sources have confirmed to CNBC-TV18 that I.N.D.I.A has been allowed to take 11 Airbus A320 planes on a wet lease, and this comes at a time when the airline already has nearly 40 of its planes on the ground due to engine issues. I.N.D.I.A's shares were under pressure in today's trade. This after Pratt & Whitney's parent RTX said it will have to remove 600 to 700 engines that power the A320neo planes by early 2024. That's, of course, a global recall, not just pertaining to I.N.D.I.A. The Union Cabinet has cleared the expansion of the subsidized cooking gas scheme. The government will provide 1,650 crore rupees to oil marketing companies to expand the Ujjwala scheme. 75 lakh new connections will be provided under the scheme, and with this, the total beneficiaries stand at 10.35 crore connections. So the Ujjwala getting a further bump up from the government. The big newsmaker this evening, Standard Chartered, is upbeat on its India business. In an exclusive conversation with me, CEO Bill Winters said that India is welcoming to long-term foreign players who make strong local commitment and international investors who are keen on tapping into the consumer market, the infrastructure space and the tech opportunity. He also said that Standard Chartered's digital SME platform in India has been a huge success, something they're hoping to replicate. Speaking of China, Winters said that the bank has taken big losses and the stimulus that the Chinese government has rolled out at this point in time has not lifted the Chinese market just yet, but they will not necessarily need to provide more for their Chinese exposure. Take a look.
The international companies are also stepping up their investment in India. Now, you can look at FDI statistics from month to month and see a very erratic story. But every indication we have is that international investors are very keen to tap into the Indian consumer market, to the Indian infrastructure development, to Indian technology, by investing in the country. The fact that India is just in the right place in terms of its embracing of technology at a time when that's a distinguishing characteristic. And India's been quite welcoming to long-term foreign players, if I can call us a foreign bank, but who have made a strong local commitment. So we set up this e-commerce platform. It's been a huge success, so much so, in fact, that we've replicated it now in Vietnam, in Ghana, in Kenya, and we'll launch in other markets as well. It's a homegrown, it's a Bangalore fintech is what it is, that Standard Chartered happens to own 100% of. Now, we've actually sold off bits and pieces to different investors who see the strategic value. But it captures to me a lot of the story of India, which is technical competence off the charts. I mean, we do most of our technical development globally is done out of our Indian technology centers. Entrepreneurial, right to the core. Feeding into the small business universe in India, absolutely critical for us, but I think also for the economic development of the country. The biggest losses that we've taken are in Chinese commercial real estate. But the market seems to have broadly stabilized. The stimulus packages are having an effect, but it's not lifting the market back up. So, but the financial system in China is still very strong, so that there's no concern that this is spilling over to the banking sector or the Chinese have also done a very good job of reining in the non-bank sector. So I'd say the jury's out on how long it will take for China to get back to its potential growth rate and where the growth will go from there. But they're managing things quite directly, and I would say so far so good.
Well, it's a detailed interview that I had with Bill Winters, the global CEO of Standard Chartered. You can catch it right here on CNBC-TV18. That's coming up for you at 9:30 p.m. The big global story, top global tech CEOs including Elon Musk, Sundar Pichai, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates and many others are meeting US lawmakers to discuss artificial intelligence. The closed-door meeting will be the first bipartisan Senate forum on AI to help the Congress formulate and implement regulations. That meeting currently underway in Washington, D.C. A district court in Washington has begun hearing what is the most significant challenge to the power of big tech in decades. The U.S. government is taking Google to court for monopolizing the online search industry. Prashant is standing by to explain why this landmark case could shape the future of tech and, of course, Silicon Valley as well. Prashanta, what's the significance of this matter?
I may be exaggerating a bit here, but I guess not by too much when I say that this is being seen as a very consequential trial with respect to big tech power in the modern era. Let me quickly tell you what has really happened. Now, the U.S. Department of Justice and Attorney Generals of 38 U.S. states are alleging that Google maintains its monopoly power in the search and search advertising market through a set of exclusive contracts that make Google the default search engine on a range of products in exchange for a share of the advertising revenue generated by Google searches. Now, what are these exclusive contracts? To give you an example, these are contracts with web browser developers, most notably Apple and Mozilla, original equipment manufacturers like Samsung, and wireless carriers like Verizon who sell Android devices. So how much does Google pay these companies, which are on the other side as part of this, in a way, quid pro quo? JP Morgan analysts estimate that Google will pay out nearly $30 billion to search distribution partners this year in 2023, which is about 17% of Google's search and other gross revenue. You must be wondering what is wrong in all of this. Well, US regulators are essentially arguing, the government is arguing, that Google's alleged exclusive dealing arrangements violate Section 2 of the Sherman Act, which makes it unlawful for a person to monopolize or attempt to monopolize or combine or conspire with any other person or persons to monopolize any part of the trade or commerce. Well, how will this be settled? Broadly, there are two outcomes which many are watching out for. One is status quo, nothing changes, right? So that would be a win for Google. On the other hand, it's possible that Google loses these search distribution deals. Analysts point to the second outcome as a potential blow because this, the second outcome, then introduces the risk that a competitor, like for example Microsoft's Bing, could become the default search partner provider on platforms where Google right now is the default today. There is of course also the chance that Apple could develop or acquire its own search engine. How long could this trial sort of last, and when will we know the outcome? Using historical context in an earlier example, the US Department of Justice versus Microsoft case went on for more than 3 years. The trial began in May of 1998 and the settlement only came through in 2001. In any case, I think this will be a case which will be, as you said, very closely watched to assess the sometimes uneasy equation that big tech around the world shares with governments around the world. Back to you.
Yes, we are going to be watching this very closely. Prashant, many thanks for joining us. And speaking of legal battles, the latest in the legal battle between SEBI and Zee promoter Puneet Goenka. Now, the market regulator has raised concerns yet again over transactions between Zee and SL entities. This at the hearing at the Securities Appellate Tribunal. SEBI argues that there are, and I quote, significant red flags and the transaction cannot be genuine or a coincidence. SEBI has called on Zee to present evidence to prove that the transactions were genuine. The tribunal will resume hearing the matter tomorrow. EdTech unicorn Byju's has been accused by its lenders of hiding $533 million in a little-known hedge fund. This as per a Bloomberg report. The hedge fund is supposed to have been listed as its principal business address as a Miami IHOP pancake restaurant. Byju's has denied the allegation, saying that it was not party to the Florida court proceedings and was not served with copies of the lawsuit. In a statement, Byju's added that the lender's application for information on the $500 million, part of which was received by Byju's Alpha, was rejected. Vadia Group-backed Bombay Dyeing will monetize its land parcel in Mumbai's Worli area for 5,200 crore rupees. The company is set to sell its land to Goisu Realty in 2 phases. Bombay Dyeing will receive around 4,600 crore rupees from the buyer for the first phase. The balance amount of 525 crore rupees will be paid after certain conditions by Bombay Dyeing are complete. Tesla plans to source auto parts worth nearly $2 billion from India. That's the word in from Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal. He was speaking at the annual session of the Automobile Component Manufacturers Association, or ACMA. When asked about the possibility of an import duty cut on electric cars, Goyal said that the government will release a policy after consulting industry. Take a look.
Tesla already last year bought $1 billion of components from, I think, all of you sitting here. I have the list of companies who supplied to Tesla. This year their target is nearly $1.7 or $1.9 billion, what they mentioned to me. Yesterday I had a conversation with some of the other auto industry participants, and they also indicated that they have interest in coming to India. This is a government which provides equal opportunity to everybody. So we'll come out with a policy which will be in consultation with all the stakeholders.
Well, that is the Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal on the possibility of putting together a policy that will attract global electric vehicle manufacturers to India. Transport Minister Nitin Gadkari says the government will not make it mandatory for cars to have 6 airbags. The government had earlier proposed to implement the 6 airbag safety norm from the 1st of October. Speaking at a public event, the minister said it is now up to car manufacturers to include 6 airbags in their car. Up next on India Business Hour, Apple unveils the Series 9 watch, calling it the first carbon-neutral product from its stable. Also launches the iPhone 15 lineup with a USB-C port and an improved camera system. You can catch all our news and updates on Facebook, X, Threads, Instagram and JioCinema. Well, you are still with India Business Hour. The Supreme Court has refused to interfere with the Delhi government's blanket ban on firecrackers. The Apex Court cited high pollution levels in the national capital for this decision, adding that there are other means to celebrate the festival of Diwali. The court has also said that the petitioners can buy sweets and let people breathe clean air. Now, taking strong exception to media trials, the Supreme Court today directed the Union Home Ministry to draft guidelines for police officers during media briefings of criminal cases. The Apex Court observed that the police needs to be sensitized to avoid a media trial, saying that it impedes the justice process. Ashmit is standing by with the details. Ashmit, take us through what were the observations that came in from the Supreme Court with regards to what it calls a media trial.
Well, trial by media was in focus today before the top court of the country, the Supreme Court taking note of media trials and importantly the impact that it has on rights of the accused, on the trial process itself and the justice delivery system at large. Citing examples, recent examples of media trials, in fact, particularly the Apex Court pointed out the Arushi murder case and then led on to suggest that there is need to sensitize the police in terms of the information that is sent out to the media, to be very aware of the fact that this information has an effect and could also potentially lead to media trials. Here, the Supreme Court noted that as far as the right of the public to know about ongoing investigations is concerned, it needs to be balanced with rights of the accused person. Further, the Supreme Court went on to observe that any media reports that implicate an accused person, those such reports are unfair and that biased media reports create a public perception that there is suspicion with respect to the conduct of the accused. So, in light of all of these observations, what is the fallout? What is the direction? Well, the Apex Court has directed the Ministry of Home Affairs to come out with a set of rules, a set of guidelines that will dictate the information as and when it is discharged from the police authorities, from state institutions with respect to ongoing investigations. They have 3 months' time to deliberate on that. Meanwhile, a 30-day window has been granted to various state DGPs. All state DGPs have been directed to come back with their feedback to the MHA to enable and to assist this process of framing of guidelines. The Apex Court will take charge of this matter. We'll hear this case once again in the month of January of 2024.
Ashmit, many thanks for joining us. Now, the Andhra Pradesh High Court has ordered an interim stay on the Anti-Corruption Bureau Court's proceedings against former Chief Minister N. Chandrababu Naidu in the alleged Skill Development Corporation scam. The court has also ordered that the Crime Investigation Department cannot take custody of Naidu till September 18th, adding that Naidu will continue to remain in judicial custody. The High Court will hear the matter again on the 19th of September. Prime Minister Modi being felicitated at the BJP headquarters for the successful completion of the G20 summit. Home Minister Amit Shah, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, BJP President J.P. Nadda, along with other leaders in attendance. The India-Alliance Coordination and Election Strategy Committee held its first meeting today at NCP leader Sharad Pawar's New Delhi residence. Congress leader K.C. Venugopal said that the bloc has agreed to take up the issue of the caste census.
The coordination committee decided to start the process for determining the seat sharing. It was decided that the member parties will hold the talks and decide at the earliest. The committee decided to hold joint public meetings in different parts of the country. The first public meeting will be held at Bhopal. The parties present in the meeting agreed to take up the issue of caste census. The coordination committee authorized the subgroup of media to decide upon the names of the anchors on whose shows none of the India parties will send their representatives.
Well, that is the India Alliance there on the meeting that took place in the capital. More than 6,000 people dead, thousands missing after unprecedented floods ravaged Libya. About 25% of the port city of I.N.D.I.A has been wiped out after 2 dams burst, sending floodwaters into residential areas. Rescue teams struggling to retrieve bodies that have been swept into the sea. We must warn you that some viewers may find these visuals distressing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Dead bodies lie covered in sheets of plastic on the streets of I.N.D.I.A. The city of nearly 1 lakh people has been reduced to rubble. Mass graves are being dug to bid farewell to the deceased. According to Libya's health minister, over 1,000 bodies have been collected and around 700 have been buried so far. 2 dams within the city burst upstream due to floods, releasing 30 million cubic meters of water which wreaked havoc. With telephone and internet services disrupted, parts of Libya could see relief measures start 36 hours after the devastation. Damaged roads further delayed rescue operations in towns of Baida, Shahat and Marj. The country also recorded incessant rains right after floods for 24 hours. The torrential downpour smashed water not only in residential spaces but also in hospitals. Severe impact of floods in Libya has raised major concerns over the country's infrastructure. Although no official response has been provided on the state of dams in Derna, infrastructure across Libya is depleting for over a decade, according to international bodies like the UN. While relief measures have started with countries like Turkey, Egypt and Qatar pitching in, thousands still remain missing in Libya. With input from Reuters and news agencies, Shraddha Tiwari for CNBC-TV18.
Devastation there in Libya, and rescue operations continue in Morocco 5 days after a 6.8 magnitude earthquake that hit the country. Now, as per state media, the death toll from the quake has risen to 2,900. The number of people injured has doubled to over 5,500. UNICEF has said over 1 lakh children have been impacted by the devastating quake. More global news. North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un has vowed full and unconditional support to Putin in what he's termed as Russia's sacred fight. The two leaders met in Russia. Reports suggest that discussions have been held on an arms deal. Kim Jong-un has deemed North Korea's relationship with Russia as the first priority. Now, Apple's flagship event Wanderlust unveiled the latest iPhone 15 models and a Series 9 Apple Watch. The much-awaited products will be available from the 22nd of September. This will be the first iPhone launch after Apple opened its official stores in Delhi and Mumbai. Apple has upped its sustainability game, claiming that Series 9 watch is its first carbon-neutral product. Madhiya joins us now to explain to us how the company has hit this milestone. Madhiya, what does it mean?
Well, one big takeaway from Apple's launch event was the sustainability push. Apple CEO Tim Cook reiterated the firm's goal to have zero carbon footprint or become net zero by 2030. And what can be seen as a major milestone in that journey is the Series 9 watch. Now, Apple claims that the Series 9 watch is its first carbon neutral product. Now, how was it done? Earlier, the manufacturing of an Apple Watch included the use of plastic, leather, coal-based electricity and shipping by air. Now, the same watch is being made with recycled materials, clean electricity and is transported mostly by ocean. So what are these recycled materials that Apple claims it is using in making the Series 9 watch? First, the watch case. Apple says the watch case is made with 100% recycled aluminium. Then some of the other materials used are recycled gold, tin, copper, tungsten. Then the next comes as battery, 100% recycled cobalt used in the battery. Then the watch bands, Apple says, are made of 82% recycled yarn. And finally, the packaging is 100% made from fiber. Coal-based generated electricity is one of the major pollutants in manufacturing units. Apple claims all the manufacturing for Series 9 watch was done using 100% clean energy. Then comes the last lap of this process, that is getting the product from factories to your hands. Apple says it has moved most of its transportation to ocean freight versus the earlier mode of air freight. It has also reduced the size of the watch box, allowing to transport 25% more watches per trip. But all these initiatives are reducing the carbon footprint by only 78%. So Apple says it will cover the remaining 22% impact by investing in renewables across the world. Apple claims to have planted forests in Paraguay and Brazil, restored mangroves in Colombia, and reduced water usage by 63 billion gallons. And that's how the Series 9 watch becomes Apple's first carbon neutral product, with many more in the pipeline.
All right, Madhiya, many thanks for joining us. That's the journey that Apple has taken to put out its first carbon-neutral product. Now, France's radiation watchdog has ordered Apple to stop selling its iPhone 12 model in the country after tests showed that the phone's radiation levels were higher than what has been legally allowed. The French watchdog will now pass on its findings to regulators in other EU member states, so this is going to be something to watch out for. And before we end, American big tech and AI experts are at Capitol Hill meeting U.S. senators to brief them on the advancement of artificial intelligence in the industry. This will be the first bipartisan Senate forum on AI to have Congress formulate and implement regulations. Tech companies around the world have been calling for AI regulation. The meeting is set to last for 7 hours. However, from what we understand, senators wouldn't get an opportunity to directly ask questions to tech executives. They would have to submit written questions. Some senators have already expressed their displeasure for the AI Insight Forum being a closed session. So on your screens there, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, the CEO of I.N.D.I.A, Sundar Pichai, and many more walking in to Capitol Hill for that meeting on AI regulation. And you can catch all of our news and updates on Facebook, X, Threads, Instagram and JioCinema. You'll find us on all of those platforms. From all of us here for now, thanks very much for watching. We will see you again shortly. Stay tuned. The news continues after this break.